Jams, jams, jams. Picture books and jams. Welcome, everybody, to PBJamz. Music and picture books. What a perfect sandwich. Squish them all together. What a yummy snack.
All right, good morning or afternoon, whenever it is that you are joining us for PBJamz. My tongue's tied this morning. PBJamz, we are so glad that you are here. And I am here with Yolanda Marshall, and she is the author of C is for Carnival and also Soca Birthday Party. So we are going to be soaking up the carnival energy with her this morning, or it's morning for me. And is it morning for you too, Yolanda?
Yes, it is. It is still morning.
Yeah. So we're here in the morning, but whenever you're here, we're glad that you're here. And we're going to be soaking up this carnival energy for the next little while with Yolanda and learning about her books and her inspiration and whatever she can share with us about these two awesome books. So welcome, Yolanda.
Thank you very much for having me. What a perfect place to be. It's a beautiful day outside. I'm Yolanda Marshall, and I'm happy to share my work with you. I live in Canada, the beautiful up north, specifically Toronto, the busy city. I have most of my family are in Canada and also in the US. I was just mentioning that I have family coming in from Virginia, bringing in that nice American air and goodies.
Of course.
But I love writing. I love anything about joy. I love to dance. I love to sing. And most of all, I love to eat. And you'll realize that with my books.
Mine have a lot of food elements running through as well. It's one of the great joys of life, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, so speaking of that, what inspired you to write these two books about Carnival?
Yeah. Well, my first book about Carnival was my first book, and it's called Command's First Carnival. And that was a self-published book I wrote in 2015 after the birth of my son. And the reason I wrote that is because in Canada, a lot of Black children are raised on books that represents the American child character, the African-American character, which there's nothing wrong with that. But the thing is, a lot of us have like different backgrounds, especially Caribbean backgrounds, right? So to us, it's kind of like, well, is the character really close to who we are? No, not really. And I figured out, you know what, I need to write a book that represents my son. And he is Canadian. I am of Caribbean heritage, born in Guyana. I also have Bajan, Barbados heritage. And my ex-husband is Kenyan. So he is like this whole big cultural ball of joy, and he's Canadian. So his reality will not be that of a character that's in Texas or even New York, in a sense. Yeah, you look to say, yeah, the storyline is great. But what is it that my child will do to make him feel like he belongs in Canada? And Command's First Carnival was pretty much that. I looked around, didn't have books about Carnival, which is the biggest, most prominent event in Canada. It celebrates Emancipation Day. That was yesterday. And you know, it's a huge part of our history and who we are and the joy of that. And why I hold it so close is because when I first came to Canada, I used to visit as a kid, but to live, I was like 13, 14. And it was November. I remember there was snow on the ground. So it's your first time really seeing snow and soaking it in, like, oh my gosh, it's the snow, right? As a kid, you forget a lot of that.
Yeah.
And then it rolls around, you're going through it, you know, and you're trying to like settle in. Good thing I have a lot of family here. But summer comes around, my mom's like talking about the carnival. Wait till you see the carnival. And the minute I stepped foot into the streets and I saw the people on the road, there were more people there than the country I came from. Wow. That's huge. Yeah. It was diverse, and everyone celebrating that event, Carnival, right? Everyone celebrating this Caribbean culture. And that was the first time I felt where I belong. Like, oh yeah, Canada is my home. Reality, it is. And it really did bring a huge part of my home. So there's a huge respect for a country like Canada at this point, because I'm like, yeah, like I'm here. Like everyone here understands the songs in my head, the tone of my voice, my accent when I speak with my mom. And they see the flags. They will more likely know what these flags and the countries mean. So I felt like I belong, and I wrote Command's First Carnival because I knew that that was the event. When he gets to a certain age, he will realize, yeah, this is my home and this is what my country offers me. It's not in the Caribbean, but oh boy, did it bring a large chunk of my home and made it grand.
Right.
And that was why I got into writing. And of course, you have Command's First Carnival, the little boy going to the carnival, and he goes, okay, I'm going to buy food. So he bought beef patties and jerk chicken, like Jamaicans make jerk chickens and the food. And then he bought a flag. He bought a Canadian flag and a flag from Barbados. Like, okay, we're going to represent. And then he's watching the dancers, and he went home and dreamt about dancing in the carnival. And it's a great story, short story, poetically written. I felt, you know what? Let's dive deep into educating the younger generation about the carnival.
Mhm.
And Easter Carnival came into play. As in, like, there's so many people who watch it on TV and they'll hear back in our time in the city. And you're going to think like, okay, I guess it's a carnival. Like, what does that mean? What do they mean when they say that? When they say, oh, the people are getting on bad. What do they mean getting on bad? So it's kind of like, no, I think, kids deserve to have the knowledge and understand, what are they saying? What do they mean? What is actually going on there?
Right.
And that's where this book came in. So by the time I read this for a school or kids, they get the terms. They're like, I'm gonna dance and get on back. And it means to just have fun. No worry. No one cares how you dance. You can jump around. No one's judging you.
Yes.
You could be free. It's about freedom and the foods and everything. So I wanted a nice educational book. There are quite a few books about Carnival, but there wasn't a book to say, hey, these are Canadian kids here. They're born here, whether they're Caribbean background or not. This is a Canadian carnival held here on this land, and they're going to celebrate it. So I wanted the book where kids could feel like, yes, this is my Canadian carnival that we have. And then, of course, Soca Birthday Party. I wrote this one first, actually. And when I got a multi-book deal in 2019. This was before the pandemic had started with Chalkboard Publishing, an educational publisher. And they did this one first, right? Of course, they took all, but they did this one first. And it's a Soca Birthday Party of friends coming together. They realized we took a deeper dive into that Caribbean culture. Who are the people there? And what are their history? And you get to realize, like, oh, a lot of the stuff in the Caribbean, hey, it's the same as foods that's from Africa and also Asia, India, East India. When you have East Asia, when you have the East Indian food, like roti, we eat a lot. So it kind of teaches you the history of that, because even within that diaspora, the Caribbean diaspora, it is so diverse.
Right.
It is so diverse. Like, there's so much more to it. And this is where this book came in. We have kids of from Caribbean heritage and African heritage, and they're realizing, hold on, we have a lot in common. Oh. This is really, and the history of it. And then you get to learn it. It takes you even more in. And I love when I read this for kids, because all kids they are so used, especially in Toronto, to certain foods. And it's like, oh, so that's where that's from. Right. And it's really nice. But once again, it's the music. And just like the diverse kids, sort of the instruments to play soca music. When I was a kid, we didn't have instruments. We can play soca music on an old Pepsi glass bottle with a rock in it, and you'll shake it. You go ting 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 like this, and you make music and you sing. Like, you have your own jam going on.
Love it.
So they were diverse instruments, and they came together and they play and they dance, and they're celebrating their friend, and they're celebrating themselves as well. And then, of course, the publisher Chalkboard released in 2020, and then they said, okay, let's go for the CS for Carnival, which came out, and they just remain classics. I mean, it's 2023, and this book I got to show it on a segment. CBC Kids is our biggest television show. It's like with Cotton Ball, that's like our Sesame Street. And I got to, be on a segment, and I was singing soca music and eating jollof rice with Cotton Ball, which was nice. And of course, this is just classic. Every year since the 1960s, we've celebrated Carnival in Canada. So I hope that gives you a lot of information on how the book comes about.
That's awesome. And I love how you've just infused your culture into all those books, even though they're different, slightly different takes. They all give us little snapshots of what it's like to be Caribbean and Canadian simultaneously, which is fabulous. And not only is it good for kids in your area that can see themselves, but it's good for us too, because we can see what that looks like. We can't experience it from ourselves, but it gives us just a new perspective, which is fabulous. Yeah.
Which is so great, especially in the US. I mean, the US is huge. I remember as a kid going to, especially New York City, and I'm like, whoa, we thought we were a lot. So a lot of people here. And especially the Caribbean diaspora. There are more Caribbean people in the US than in the Caribbean. And that's reality. And I did Chalkboard this year released C's for Carnival US version. So that because we had a lot of American readers and stores buying the Canadian version. The New York Library has this one, and it's like, okay, you've got to give the US their own version because the English is different, because we have, of course, the British English, and also it gets to highlight the parts of it I just had to rewrite, not much, because it's the same thing. To be honest, it's the same thing. It's just little things you have to say instead of highlighting, oh, you may be in Toronto's Carnival. No, you may be in Atlanta's Carnival. Miami Carnival is the biggest Caribbean carnival in the US so far. You may be in New York City. Brooklyn always have a carnival. So I had to mention those places. And then in the glossary, make sure I mention that Carnival is held in the US in these certain places. Not a lot of altering of the word, but there is a C's for Carnival US as well. Right. So it's amazing how it can. And then of course they released the UK version because Notting Hill Carnival is huge in London.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's just worldwide. Everyone, there's so many people you can reach out and represent. Yeah, I love this. I love the thing about writing about Carnival because the nature of it. I like joyful things. I like fun. I like to read, and after I'm done, I want to dance and eat.
Yeah. Life does not get any better than that. Reading, eating, and musicking.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. That is like the definition of joy in my world. So talk to us a little bit about the writing process. So I know you self-published the first one. Once you got to traditional publishing, how was that different, and how did your process maybe change from one to the other?
Oh, it's a difference. So when I'm self-publishing, by the time I got to like my fourth self-published book, one of those self-published books was actually adopted, which was nice, by Chalkboard.
Yeah,
it's different because you take your manuscript and you don't have to pay for the editor yourself. You don't have to pay for the illustrator and all this stuff yourself. They go, I love this. Here's a contract, and they pay you,
which is always good.
And that's good. And then they do the work.
Yeah.
And it's like, here's illustrator says, and that's taken care of. So that's a big load off of you being a self-published author, doing it yourself. It's a huge load off your shoulder. So that was different. Mm-hmm. That gives you time to come up and think of ways and plan it out. I had time to, like, instead of focusing on, oh, I need to chase this and it's kind of like, okay, so how am I going to promote? And, what's going to be my taglines for social media? And, how am I going to do my book launch? Like, you really had a little bit more time to do that. And thinking of other stories, because that's taken off of your hands, in a sense. And right after I got that book deal, I got agented. I was approached by an agent, which was cool because even finding an agent is like trying to get a book deal. Like it's hard.
Yes, it is.
Approached by an agent, I was like, yes. I was like, yeah, whatever you know to do, because then now you could find me the book deal, right?
Yeah. Another load off.
Yes, it is so different. It takes the burden of that off of your shoulder. I write, I submit. Agent loves it. If she can come back to me and say, hey, do you want to edit this and this? I suggest this. And it's like, you could do that if you want. And of course she goes out and looks, and I love that. And then the publisher takes full care. Of course, you work with an editor back and forth, and once that's done, they disappear for a bit. They do their thing. Then you see the sketches, and it's like they might ask for input. Yeah, this is nice, and they go off and they do their thing, and you're just sitting there. It's a lot of patience.
A lot of waiting, yes.
You don't have control over your time. With self-publishing, I have control over my time. I write a book. I could say in 1 month, this has to be on Amazon, and I can make that happen. Because it's just, edit, you go on like Fiverr, you go on Upworks, it's like, okay, this person got 1 week to edit this or whatever, and you're going and you're doing this, and then you just upload, and then in 72 hours, boom, it's online. So self-publishing, you have the control over the process, and it could go so fast. With traditional publishing, there is a lot of waiting. Because as I can say, this was given in 2019. You didn't come out until 2021. I had a book that came out with Chalkboard just last year, December. It's a lot of waiting. I have my agent got me a book deal in 2020, and that book's not coming out until next year.
Right.
So it forces you to sit back and let the publishing world create the masterpiece. One thing I love about it is that I'm not alone in the writing. I am communicating with someone. I'm getting feedback with someone that, number one, is way more skilled than I am.
Right.
I've been writing for a long time, and I've seen many books go through the channel, what wins, what loses, and such. So you learn as you go. So you have to be open to learning. You have to have the patience. And with that patience, instead of just sitting around, you can't be bored, you have time to write. And keep and just submit as much as you can. And so that part is very different. I get to concentrate more on writing, which I love. I'm not, I can't change it. Of course, I'd love to have my book out now, but you can't. It requires so much patience, but within that time and that calm, you have time to write great stories. And there are times I write stories, and then within that year, you see other books coming out, and you're like, at least I have the time to go, nah, I don't like the story anymore. Let's go let's do something else. So it really, it's good in a sense, right? It changes how you write. It opens your world. It introduces you to a lot of really skilled, amazing writers, professionals. So there's a huge difference between the two. My agent is awesome. She writes great. She's an avid reader, and she's so skilled in the, she works with various groups and have a podcast about publishing. So she knows her thing. And I learned from that too. And I work in publishing, believe it or not. I actually do work, but in the academic publishing world. That's the textbooks, not the trade storybooks. So I understand a lot of times. I work in the business aspect of it and the marketing. So it helps me, and that's how I can market myself. Yeah. And I find that's what a publisher loved about me, is that I can write and I can also market myself. Yeah. And I know how to market myself. And especially when I'm writing on a diaspora that is so different than what they're used to, or they're learning with me as it goes. So there's this trust, as in no, I know Yolanda's going to do it well, because on the other world of it, she's a professional in the publishing field. Yeah. So, which is a good thing. But I learn, I keep learning as much as I go. And I have the time to write. I would say it's so different, but the biggest thing of all is, it teaches you patience.
Yeah. I often say there's just two speeds in this business. It's like supersonic speed and get it in now, get it ready. You got this deadline, you've got this, or it's just sitting back and waiting. There's not much in between, really. It's one or the other. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And for sure. Yeah, I love that. And I love what you said about learning from each other. Like you were saying, I learned from my editor and I learned from my agent, but they're also learning from me about my culture, and they're trusting me to do what I do best with marketing and letting me bring all of the pieces of myself. And I think that's so true for I'm sure for all authors, but I think especially for kid lit, like I think, just being able to bring all of ourselves and just, lay it out. I think a lot of us are drawing from our childhood experiences, and like we're reaching back and pulling that in to relate to the kids of today. But then we're also bringing in that professional adult aspect of it as well. And like for me as a teacher, that's my day job that I bring to the table. And so bringing that educational expertise, and that's just one of the great things I think about Kid Lit, is being able to kind of merge our childhood experiences and our adult experiences into something that's going to be meaningful for the children and the adults of today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sure. Yeah. And it makes great literature. And it makes you really relate to kids when you step into the space and you see their faces as you read, and you're like, yes, I did it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I got it right.
Awesome.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about the music. We talked a little bit briefly about soca, and you mentioned the musical instruments that are in Carnival, and you talked about you putting just pebbles in a bottle and shaking them. Talk to us a little bit more about the musical connections within your books,
Yes.
but also maybe in Carnival itself.
Yes. So with Carnival, the music history of Carnival is so far back. There's like the enslaved Africans would be, create kaiso, and, kind of like soca came from calypsos, like Afro-Caribbean music. Calypso is an art form you'd be singing, and a lot of times they can sing. It's kind of like jazz. You can express your feelings, you can say certain things, and it could be political, it could be a way, but it's just communicated, and it's felt, and it's understood, so calypso music is in the Caribbean. People would sing it, and they'll sing about anything, sing about politics, they sing about their neighbors and whatever it is, and everyone would sit down and listen. And so it's one of these vibes. Soca music now took that Afro Caribbean genre, and when our Indo-Caribbean people came, that was after the ending of slavery to the Caribbean region. They brought their beats, like the chutney beats, chutney drums and such, and the tassa drums, and the beats of the Indians and the beats of the Africans blend together. It's a marriage of the music that gave birth to soca. So we'll say soca is like the soul of calypso, but it's more fun. It's like where it becomes so diverse and so many instruments infused into there, right? And it's created by Afro-Caribbeans. They took the beat of the Indo-Caribbean beats, put it together. So Carnival, the Carnival you see now, soca is the music for it. The instrument, when we're talking about calypso and soca, just like calypso, just like soca, came from Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean region. And so did steel pans. Steel pans was created with the oil drums, the big oil drums. They didn't have instruments, so they tuned it and created an instrument. And it's such a beautiful sound. Like it literally tells you where you are. You're in the tropics, you're in the Caribbean.
Right.
It's one of those instruments. It's just, it claims its space and its place. And it owns a huge space in the Carnival. So every time you have Carnival, there's steel pan music and there's soca playing on steel pans. You can play anything on a steel pan, I have a friend who plays at the weddings, and she plays all the love songs in the steel pan. It's beautiful.
Oh,
and
sweet.
Yeah, so the Carnival, when you think about Carnival, the instrument, steel pans. So my soca birthday party with jollof rice is the food that Anne loves, and steel pans. So she's sitting down here and she's listening to the soca music played on the steel pans while she's eating her jollof rice.
Love it.
So the same where I'm going to be at Carnival, listening to soca music played on the steel pans and I'm dancing. So it's just all about the energy, and that's the music of Carnival. Soca music is fun. It does not lend to sadness. It is not a sad song. Even if there's a sad soca song, you still can't be sad, you just dance. It's one of those genre of music, like it just makes you move, right?
Right.
And there are times if you ever feel down, and I find a lot of people are drawn to it, and they're not from Caribbean background, but what they sense with it is like you can put it on and you can feel down. There are times, I find there's some people, if they feel depressed or such, you put music on and it uplifts your mood. And it's one of those genre of music. As in, like, people can be in the worst of poverty and wake up in the morning and hear a soca song, and they still have the capacity to just sing and brighten your mood and just move and just like, yeah, you know, it's uplifting. It's a celebration. It's freedom. It's dancing. It's a no judgment zone. It's that kind of a genre of music, and it's so cultural. Like, you hear soca music, you'd be like, oh, who's a Caribbean person here? So it's one of those things. And I love it. So I grew up in Guyana. Guyana is located in South America, but it's a Caribbean nation because it's a part of the Caribbean community. Community is not based on your actual location. It's based on many things, the history,
Exactly.
and the people and such. Like, I am in Canada and I'm still a part of the Caribbean community. So and Guyana is like the Guyana, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and Barbados form the CARICOM, the Caribbean community. They're like the huge backbone of it. And the CARICOM Caribbean community, like the head office is actually in Guyana. So my heritage is Caribbean, of course. And although soca and steel pans came from Trinidad and Tobago, it was played throughout the Caribbean region. Even in Jamaica, Jamaica have reggae. We all listen to reggae. Trinidad and Tobago have soca. We all listen to it because we can all relate to it. It's all about our culture. We can sing it. We understand the words, the accent. Of course, you find between the different countries, it's going to sound different, but it's the same thing, like the same words. So we could sit and talk to each other, and we understand. But yeah, it's just the music of Carnival, and I grew up with that. My dad is a jazz musician, by the way. That was a few I remember growing up loving jazz in the Caribbean, especially as a kid. I love jazz. Love when they put on the album. And I grew up on, like, I love Miles Davis, Thelonious Monk. Like, I mean, way back. I love jazz. The sound of it. I just have to play it every week in my car. I go in and when 91.1 FM, and I grew up with that. My dad's family, they all played instrument. They all played the guitar. I started playing at 8 years old. I don't play as good anymore because when I came to Canada, I didn't have a guitar anymore. They all played. My dad, of course, took that guitar out of church and into the club. So he's a jazz musician and rock and roll. He plays rock and roll professionally. And like, I grew up with that, but I can't stay away from soca music. I love soca music so much. I love to dance. So that's where it ties in. And you can't talk about Carnival, you can't talk about Caribbean culture without talking about the music. It's just a part of it. Songs and sounds mean so much to us. You go to a Caribbean party or something, the music is everything. You got to put on the music. That music, you trying to talk to each other, that music comes off. Everyone's looking around like, what happened? Something wrong? What's going on? Is the party over? Like, why is the party over? Like, it's just that music has to keep going. It doesn't matter if it's blocking you talking to someone, but it's just a part of the culture. It's the expression. So yeah, it ties right in. It's very impossible to not include it, I find, especially if you are inviting others to learn and to feel. And especially like having kids. I have my son, he's 8. Like, he just got to feel it. You just got to dance and move and keep their imagination and mind going. So yeah, I add soca and music to a lot of my songs. I have hot cross buns for everyone, although it's not soca music. I find that I need to sing something, hot cross buns, hot cross buns. You sing that fast and slow, and then you go into the story, and then at the end of it, you're singing it again. Because I grew up with my dad, who always read to me at night, and along with that reading, he played the guitar.
Oh, sweet.
I started writing poems because I used to write songs for him. So yeah, it just ties right in. But yeah, if I'm talking about Caribbean culture, I have to include the music of Carnival, and that's soca and steel pans.
Yeah, love that. Love it. Love, love, love. So as a music teacher and as a kidlit writer, I mean, I think that's true for most cultures. You know, like music just becomes synonymous. I think it's especially true for the Caribbean culture. I mean, when I think about Caribbean culture, I think about the food and the music. Like those are the two things, you know, that come to my mind. I mean, of course, the island culture as well. I mean, you know, the water and but the two things that first come to my mind are the food and the music. And I think that's probably true for most of our cultures. You know, like those are the two of the real key identifying marks of a culture are what do you eat and what do you know, how do you make music?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
The blue of the culture. It says a lot about the
exactly.
history of it, how diverse it is, what has influenced it. You
Yes.
know, why is it the way it is now? Like there's so much more to it, right?
Yes.
Um, which is it's nice and we can draw back to and it's like a reality check on like who we are. And yeah, yeah, it's a blueprint.
Yeah, beautiful. Love that. So we've talked about the process and the publishing, and we've talked about the music. And so what is there that you would like for us to know that I didn't ask? Is there something else about your books that you would want the world to know or be aware of?
Um, for me, it's yeah, I think I said a lot, but once again, it's just when I write my stories, I always want to tell a story of growth, of joy, of fun, of celebrating each other, um, and our differences, celebrate our differences, our similarities, and invite everyone into it. And you find a lot of my books would be like celebrations and parties,
Mhm.
and inclusion and everyone coming together and having a good time. Because when I send my son to school, I just hope that he feels that way with his friends. He
Yeah.
is welcome, he is seen, he's celebrated as he will celebrate others. Um, and that's usually what my story try to convey, and I write in that aspect. And I always love to write in a tone where someone reads it, whether it's a child or an adult, um, they walk away learning something about a culture they don't know, or even about their own culture. There are many people in the Caribbean when I wrote a piece of Black Cake for Santa, because it's like in our Caribbean culture, we look forward to sorrel and ginger beer, and no, that's not alcohol; it's just ginger soaked, and black cake, and you know, pastel or whatnot. We look forward to that at Christmas time, not the cookies and milk. And I'm like, okay, what are we gonna leave for Santa? My son's like, black cake. I was like, piece of black cake for Santa. I wrote that book. And within the Caribbean culture, in the back, I put the origins of black cake. And I go, the origins of black cake is from Britain, the plum pudding. You know, the plum pudding, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
find English would make, and it's really soft. And then it came to the Caribbean region, and they added more flour and stuff to make it dense, and of course soaked in rum and such. You can make it alcohol free, of course. Don't worry, we're not giving kids that one. But yes, and it's like they go, oh, I didn't know that was the history of it. It's like, yeah, because we just say black cake and we feel like, oh, it just belongs, but it does have a history. And yes, it
Right.
did came from there. Sorrel as well. There were many people drinking sorrel as a variant of the hibiscus plant.
Okay.
And yeah, and they had no clue, like so much history. They just felt like, oh, it's just from the Caribbean, right? In some Latin countries, they call it Jamaica. And it's like, because they were getting it from Jamaica, it's like, but here's the history. It's actually from that variant is from the West African region.
Mm.
And it came all the way over, and it was, you know, for medicinal use, but it has a history. And in Nigeria and Ghana is Zobo. And we have Caribbean people who walk away and go, whoa, I didn't know that. And I love that. I love
Yeah.
when I teach people within my community about themselves, because that's authentic. And I know that anyone else that learns from it will learn something that is true and that's real. Um, and something that they can carry on. They learn more than their parents did. Like my mom learned. Like my mom, I didn't know this, and I was like, yeah. I mean, if you could teach, for me, the biggest thing is if I can teach a senior citizen something about something that's been here as long as they have. It's like, you got it.
Yeah.
And especially I had a lot of elders in my community going, this is when they tell you, yeah, this is great. And I stick on that as in like, yes, I am making sure that I communicate, culture in its authentic and true form, and it's welcoming, and yeah, lots of music and food, lots of music.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us for this episode of PBJamz and educating us more about Carnival and Caribbean culture and the music and the food. We have thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyed that. And for you guys who are watching and listening and reading, Yolanda has offered a copy of C is Carnival. C is for Carnival. And yeah. And so if you just leave a comment on the blog, so if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you go to the blog, leave a comment on the blog, and we will draw a name out to be the proud owner of a copy of her book. It is so beautiful. Look at that. Those steel pans. Oh, the joy just exudes from those illustrations too.
Yes,
So
by Daria
fabulous.
Lavrova. Yeah. Daria Lavrova is so awesome. She lives in the Netherlands and she's never been to a carnival, but isn't it amazing how sounds and reading the words can bring everything alive? Yes.
That is awesome.
Is exceptional. She's a lawyer by day and an artist at night.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So leave a comment on the blog and we will put your name in the drawing for C is for Carnival. And check out, I'll link up below all of Yolanda's information and where you can find her on socials and where you can buy the books. If you would like to purchase any of the books she's talked about today, then all those links will be below and in the teacher tip section for music teachers and for classroom teachers, as well as daycare and preschool and homeschool. Like there'll be tons of stuff linked up below. So make sure you check that out. And if you do read one of her books, we always like to remind you that there are lots of great ways that don't cost a penny that you can support our authors. You can certainly read her books, request them from the library, leave positive reviews on Goodreads and Amazon. You can recommend her books to people in your world that would enjoy learning more about Caribbean culture or Carnival, Canadian and Caribbean culture as well. So there's lots of ways that you can do that. You can just do shout outs on social media if you've read and enjoyed any of her books, or if you've enjoyed this episode, give her a shout out on social media. So those are some great ways that don't cost anything. Of course, we want you to also buy her books and request them from the library, but there's lots of great ways to support these authors that are providing so much great inspiration for our young people and education. So give her a shout out, read the books, review, do all the fun things, and make sure you leave a comment to be entered in the giveaway. Thanks again, Yolanda, for being here.
Thank you.
Had a blast. Thanks. And now I'm ready to go put on some soca music and go make some Caribbean food.
Woohoo! Yes.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on PBJamz. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
PBJamz, what a yummy treat. Jamming PBs all the time. PBJamz.